Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is day 2 of my daily vlog, and I have to be honest, I almost didn't film this morning, but I'm sticking to my word of filming every day this week. I have obviously just woken up. This is actual footage. Nick is downstairs feeding on her breakfast, and first of all, I need to brush my hair. Okay, anyways, Nick is downstairs with a baby. I think I'm just going to make the bed and go downstairs. Good morning. What's going on over here? Coffee lesson?
Kind of a weird one.
Look at your outfit with horses. Hi, baby. This is my breakfast. I made the viral cottage cheese eggs, which admittedly are pretty good. Half an avocado and a clementine. And some peppermint tea. Hi, little boo. Hi, little boo. You wanna try some eggs? Hello. It is later in the afternoon and I'm deviating from my original video plan, which was just to film my day. And instead, I'm going to tell you guys a story. It's an old story. I think this happened over 15 years ago, so I'm going to try to recollect all of the details. I've never shared it before on social media, and I don't know what has prompted me to share it now, but I've thought about it a couple times recently, and I've also talked about how I don't know if it's just getting older or having a kid. I guess both of those things have given me like a new sense of nostalgia and made me reflect back on my life a lot. And in the process of doing that, I've had very vivid flashbacks, if you will. Or like, I don't know, I've just like recounted so many memories and events that I've experienced in my life. First of all, I need to do a disclaimer. Mom and Dad, if you are watching this video, please abort. This is not for your eyes. A lot of you have been following me for a long time and you know some of my history. For those of you who do not know this, when I was younger, I danced in strip clubs for a number of years. It's something I don't really talk about often, but I've talked about it here and there on my channel. These were not my finest days. I'm not in that place in my life anymore, okay? But nonetheless, it is something I did when I was younger. An event in my life that was very challenging was when my parents found out that I had been doing this. You guys obviously have now met my parents on my channel. They're very like, I don't want to say wholesome, and they're definitely not super conservative by any means, but I would call them traditional. So for them to find out I had been working in strip clubs was a huge blow and something that was, you know, it was not great. It was right before I moved to New York. I was living in Baltimore and I was in the process of like packing up my house to move to New York. I won't go into details of how they found out, but they found out and it was just like this horrible moment in my life. I felt super embarrassed. I felt guilty and just, you know, it's not something I ever wanted my parents to find out about. Between both of my parents, I thought that my dad would be much more upset. I thought my mom would be sad and disappointed, and I thought my dad would just be very angry. But as it turns out, he was the one who was more understanding, much more understanding, which really surprised me, given at least given all of my interactions with my father from childhood and from adolescence and all that stuff. I just thought he would be livid. I think a day or two after that happened, he sent me a really nice email, something along the lines of how he was still, you know, really proud to be my dad and that he would support me always. And I know I haven't talked a lot about my relationship with my father on my channel, but growing up, we really butted heads a lot. And so, yeah, I was really surprised that he did that. And now our relationship is a lot stronger. I feel like I just look at him from a different perspective. And anyways, I'm getting totally off topic. This is not related to the story. Put that aside. when I was visiting my parents last month, I was going on a walk with my mom one day and she asked me if I regretted dancing. And I've thought about this a lot, you know, over the last like decade plus. My life would be just so considerably different. I have no idea where I would be right now, but I certainly wouldn't have been able to move to New York. Just everything in my life would be so drastically different. I don't think I would have met my boyfriend, and of course then I wouldn't have my baby, and it's hard to imagine those things not aligning. It's just a complete mindfuck to think about. But anyways, my mom asked me if I regretted it, and this story came into my mind. I don't know why. When this happened, I was, I think 19 or 20 years old. And at the time I was working at Hustler Club in Baltimore. I was also working at another club sometimes. I kind of bounced around at that time. Like I worked at a few different clubs, but I was mostly working at Hustler in Baltimore, on Baltimore Street. That was the club I had first started working at before I even made the transition to dancing. I had been like a cocktail waitress at Hustler, and when I stopped doing that, I started dancing at another club, and then I would eventually return to Hustler. Okay, you didn't need to know any of that. Really not super relevant to the story, but I was also living above a liquor store. It was my first apartment, and my parents knew I was living here, and in hindsight, I'm kind of surprised they let me live here. It just, I don't know, like a 19-year-old girl living above a liquor store. I did have a roommate, her name, well, I'm not gonna say her name, but I had a roommate. She was not a dancer. I don't know if we went to high school together, but I knew her from high school, and she was a few years older than me. At the time, I almost always worked on weekends. So Friday and Saturday night, I was working at the club, and then I would generally work like 2 additional weeknights. Not always, but I would say an average of 4 nights a week, including the weekend. I mean, depending on what club you work at, you can kind of just show up whenever you want and work. You clock in, you know, you tip out everyone in the house that you're supposed to pay, and you work. Some clubs do require that you make a schedule, but even when you do make a schedule, like, you can kind of just show up whenever you want for the most part. If you have ever worked at a strip club or been to one, you may know that they often do different events on like various nights of the week. And one of those events is called an amateur contest. I can't remember the specifics, but when I worked at Hustler, it would be like the first Wednesday of every month. And basically what happens at an amateur contest is women come to the club and audition for either a chance to win a prize or a chance to work at the club. Now, the requirements for participating, at least at the clubs that I've worked at, the only requirements were that you couldn't previously work at the club. So obviously you can't like work at the club and then audition as an amateur when you're already employed. However, you could do an amateur contest at another club even if you were dancing somewhere else. The idea is like, you're an amateur and you've never done this before, but I would say it was kind of mixed. Like, it would be a handful of girls that danced at other clubs and maybe a few girls that really had never danced before who were true amateurs, you know, just trying to win some money, or maybe they were interested in working at the club. So one night, for whatever reason, I was supposed to work at Hustler, but I decided to drive to Philadelphia because I heard there was going to be an amateur contest at the Penthouse Club in Philly. I had never done an amateur contest before. I had only seen them when I was at work. And I don't know why I decided to do this, but I do know that I was saving for a car that I really wanted, which I'll share more about later. So I decided to drive to Philly. Now at the time, I was driving a 1990 Toyota Camry in white that I had purchased from my grandfather. And yeah, I drove from Baltimore to Philly. I can't even remember how long it took me to get there, but maybe like an hour and a half, something along those lines. And I think it started at like 9 p.m. The prize was $1,000. That was a lot of money. And I just thought, you know what? Why the heck not? I figured I could do the amateur contest, and if I lost, then I would maybe just work at that club for the night if they would let me. So when I arrived, there were like so many girls competing. I don't know how many there were. I want to say like 40, but that could be a fabricated number because this was a very long time ago, like I said. regardless. There were like so many people there, and a lot of them were girls who I could tell were already dancers, and a lot of them were just gorgeous. So when I saw my competition, I thought like, for sure I'm not gonna win this, and I was a little bit bummed, but again, I figured I could just work at the club after the amateur contest was over and maybe make my money back, at least to pay for gas, and maybe make a little bit of money on top of that. So basically, you know, we all lined up, and I think this club has since closed down. This is the only time I ever went to that club, so I can't really speak on it much, but the way that it was arranged inside, there was like a very long staircase and then a very long platform. So the stage was actually quite narrow, and there was of course a pole, and then there were motorcycles in the club, like maybe on the side of the stage or something, I don't know. That is what I remember. So you walk down this like very long staircase to the end of the stage, and then there's, you know, seats around the stage, and there's tables in the club so everyone can see you, but the stage is like the focal point of the club. So we all lined up. I tipped the DJ out like $20 and requested a song that I wanted to hear. When it came to be my turn, like I said, tipped the DJ out. He didn't play my song. I don't forgive him for that. I went down on the stage, and like the minute that I got to the end of the stage, I heard somebody screaming my name, which was my stage name at the time, from Hustler. So I looked out into the crowd, which was pretty full, and I see this blonde older woman who went by the name Brooke at the time, who also sometimes worked at Hustler. Brooke was one of those people who was always very nice to everyone. You do develop in that club life, you do develop like your people that you kind of like work with, or they pull you into, you know, money situations or whatever. And she was not in my close circle, but she was always someone who was very sweet, very kind, and someone that I always said hi to. So I hear her screaming my name. At first I didn't know what was going on, and then she comes up to the stage and she's, you know, tipping me all these dollars. She had been sitting with a client, probably one of her regulars, and yeah, she's just like egging me on and just my #1 supporter. This was something that I was not expecting. I didn't know she was gonna be working there. All I can say is that what ensued from there was like a scene out of a movie. So I did my set, which was just one song, and after that, they call back, I don't know how many girls it is. Starts with 40, and then 15, and then maybe 5, and then they choose a winner or something like that. So after I did my first set, I got called back for the second round. I thought that this would take like an hour maybe, and it ended up taking like 2.5 hours, I wanna say, because in between, you know, they had girls that worked at the club dancing and whatnot, and it just continued to get drawn out. And I think partially because there was so much hype, and I wanna be honest, I think that Brooke, she had definitely had some drinks, which is probably why she was so excited to see me, and I can't even fault her for that. Like, girl, thank you. Anyways, I got called back to the second group, and then after we had all done another song, I got called back, and I thought they were gonna just pick somebody from that group, but then they whittled it down again to 2 or 3 of us, I can't remember. By like the final round, I was still thinking like, for sure I'm not gonna win this, but I felt okay about it because I had a couple $100 already in tips that I had made, so I figured like, all right, my gas is covered, you know, if I leave the club, even if I don't work for the rest of the night, I still made a little bit of money. So in the final round, it was me versus 1 or 2 other girls, and then something like 20 minutes later, they like made a decision based on applause and crowd participation, I don't know. I fucking won. Yeah, woo! $1,000 at the time, man. When I was 19, that was so much money. But anyways, so I won the contest. I was like on cloud 9. At that point, I had a few $100s from all of my stage work as well. So say like $1,300 or $1,400, and I just felt like, dang, this is a really good night. I'm so glad that I came here on a whim. And I remember the club tried to get me to sign a contract to work there, and it was just like way too far from where I live to be driving, especially both ways, and getting off at like 2 a.m., driving all the way back from Philly. I knew I did not want to do that. I don't think I signed a contract. I think I said like, oh, I'll get back to you guys this week. Like, let me come in another day this week and like check it out. And they were like, yeah, okay, sure. And I left with my money. I drove home in my Toyota Camry from 1990, got home, whipped out my shoebox from under the bed. I know that sounds like I'm making it up, but I really had a box under my bed because I was saving for a new car. And I put all that money in there, and shortly thereafter, I was able to buy my dream car, which at the time, in true Julia fashion, was a 4-door family sedan by Acura. It was a TSX. I don't think they make them anymore. I didn't have any credit. I didn't have a credit card at the time or anybody who could co-sign for me to get a car. In total, I was able to save over $15,000 in cash in a box under my bed. And maybe about 2 weeks later, I took my friend from college and she drove with me to DC, and I bought this car. It was used. It wasn't even a new car. It was a used Acura TSX. It was red with tan leather interior. It had GPS. It had like all the nice features on the inside. I drove my new car home and she drove my Toyota back. So that's how it worked. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, like, I definitely got a crappy deal on the car. I knew the only way that I could maybe get this car was to put a really large down payment on it. I couldn't tell my parents that I was buying a new car. They would have, you know, been wondering how I got the money. I didn't have any other friends who could co-sign for me, and because I didn't have a credit card, I didn't have credit. Once I got to the dealership, they did get me approved based on my down payment, but the interest rate was it was something crazy. Like, I want to say it was over 20%, which is a horrible deal, like horrible. But I took it because I knew that was my only option at the time. Yeah, I signed the deal, I put my money down on the car, and I drove home feeling like so accomplished and so proud of myself, but also a little bit sad because I really wanted my parents to see that I had bought this car for myself with my own money. You know, I had worked to get this car really hard to save up this money, but I couldn't tell them. And I mean, I remember driving even to their house after I got it, and I had to park like a couple blocks away. Like, it was real shady on my part. Really, really shady. I even tinted the windows so that in case they saw me driving, they wouldn't recognize me. Like, this is the kind of person I was at one point in my life. I'm just so glad I no longer have to hide who I am. It's a beautiful feeling to just be who you are and have people accept you for who you are, including for any past flaws or moments that you're not proud of. I want to jump back for a second because when I left the club, it was like before midnight. I do remember that, which is way earlier than I would have left if I was working at Hustler. And I drove home, like, listening to, I don't even think my car had a CD player, so I was probably listening to FM radio. But I drove home, like, just on a natural high. And at that moment, everything felt like it was right in the world. And I've actually had that feeling as an adult for very, very drastically different reasons. That is my story for the day. I'm sorry if it was a boring one. There's absolutely no point really in me telling it, besides it was just something that I have been thinking about. It is in no way meant to encourage any of you guys to go out and do one of these contests. Thank you guys all for watching. I will see you in my next video tomorrow, which will be nothing like this one, and I will talk to you then.